I'm Mark Sanders from South Bend, Indiana, and I drive a 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 5. Well, in 2014, the first EVs were coming out, and I was very interested in them. I had been looking for a way to reduce my carbon footprint. I was living in Atlanta at the time and leased a Nissan Leaf for 3 years, and it was just a wonderful car. The only limitation was the mileage, the range was about 100 miles. And so that was good for in-town driving, but it didn't let me go out of town. And so after that lease was up, I moved here to South Bend and I started looking around for the next generation of cars that had greater range. And for my price range, the Ioniq 5 was exactly what I was looking for. It gives me a range of about 300 miles in the perfect conditions and not so perfect conditions, 250 miles, which is great. And so I got Ioniq 5 in December of 2022. I charge in a number of locations. There are two wonderful free charging stations in South Bend, in the city of South Bend, right on Jefferson Street, next to Howard Park and downtown near the municipal building. So if I have business in those two locations, I'll just plug in. And then there's several locations on the campus of Notre Dame where I work, and so I can plug in there during the day, and I can plug in at home. I just installed solar panels this past summer, and that came with a home charger. This car comes with a 100,000-mile warranty, and so I can take the car in. They recommend every 8,000 miles to the Hyundai dealership, and they do the regular tune-ups, which cost me nothing. And so if there's some kind of more dramatic damage to the car, it would cost me something. But at this point, I fuel the car almost free and I don't have to pay for any maintenance. The car I had before this was a Nissan Maxima, manual transmission. I had put 300,000 miles on it. It was a wonderful car, but it was time to make a change. The range on that car was, I could get probably 400 miles to a tank of gas. And so when I got the Ioniq 5, one of the reasons it was attractive, it had one of the longest ranges for its class. And so I get, in perfect conditions, a little over 300 miles to a charge. The longest trip I've taken thus far is to Chicago and back, but I'm planning a trip to Atlanta, where I lived before I moved to South Bend. And so that will be my first long distance trip with the EV. In terms of what my family thinks, they all think it's wonderful. To put it in the terms of my 16-year-old son, he says, "Dad, your car slaps." So, and he says, when I pick him up from school, he says, everybody's like, "Man, your dad has the meanest car in the lot." So everybody thinks this looks cool and they're really interested. Strangers at stoplights will roll down their windows and say, "What is that?" And wow, that's a really wonderful car. So I've gotten lots of really nice attention and people being curious about the car and where they might be able to get one. I highly recommend an EV. I know that in this area, there's a sense that because it gets so cold, that the batteries aren't going to perform very well, and that just has not been my case. There's no question that the battery has a shorter charge when it gets down in the 20s and below, but you can still get around. You just have to plan for charging more often. But even if you're charging more often, you're going to be paying less for the electricity than what would be comparable in gasoline. And also, this EV came with a program with Electrify America, which is equivalent. It's about 2,000 hours. It's about 2 years worth of free charging. So any charger with Electrify America across the country, I can charge for virtually no charge whatsoever. In the summer of 2022 and the fall of 2022, I was researching EVs and there weren't really many in the South Bend area. So when I found the car that I wanted, the closest dealership was in Libertyville, Illinois, which is just north of Chicago. So I had to travel up to Chicago, north of Chicago, to get this car. But now they're really much more readily available. There's a Hyundai dealership right here in Mishawaka on Grape Road. They have the Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6, which is kind of the sedan model. So they're much easier to find in the kind of larger South Bend area than they were just a year ago. The most appealing aspect of the car is its performance and its responsiveness. EVs in general are much quicker than internal combustion engines because the torque is much higher. The delivery to the drivetrain is direct from the engine. There are no gears, and so this car accelerates, and you have to be kind of careful about how much energy you put into your acceleration because it can get away from you if you're not paying attention. So maneuvering in and out of traffic, trying to merge into traffic on the highway is just much easier with this car. And then, of course, the car just has all of these, state-of-the-art features where you can surf the net, where you can, pull up your music from your iPhone. You can pull up maps. All of those things are easily available on the display screen. You get consistent monitoring of how much mileage you're getting, how many miles you have left on your charge. You can find charging stations on the location map that comes with the car. You can also do that through your phone very easily. So the car is just very, very convenient in ways that I hadn't expected. In some ways, it's a kind of smart car. It has all these bumps and bells and whistles that alert you when traffic is near, when you're backing up, when you're getting close to things. So it's just a very responsive car, very intelligent car. Sometimes it's a little too smart. Yeah, I really appreciate the fact that the city of South Bend has several charging stations. But I think the greatest impediment to people buying EVs is the fear that they won't be able to charge. And so more charging stations would just be wonderful. I think that that would be the greatest contribution that the city could make towards this movement to get more people driving more EVs. The three charging stations I'm aware of, as I said, at Howard Park, downtown municipal building, and there's one next to the zoo. And so spreading out from there, so that there are none on the west side that I'm aware of. So EV charging stations on the west side. Some further south than the zoo would be wonderful. And then, of course, getting Mishawaka and other surrounding communities involved. There's one charging station just right in downtown Mishawaka. But again, the more there are, I'm sure the more people who are interested in EVs will be encouraged to go ahead and get one. I enjoy driving an electric car for the efficiency, for the responsiveness. I think it's wonderful. It's a wonderful example for my son, who's very concerned about his future in the environment, and to see, that my generation is trying to do something. And I really appreciate the responses I get from the rest of the community looking at the car, and they want to drive it. My neighbors want to ride it, and etc. The only thing that I would add that I think is really important for people looking at EVs is that the kind of larger global market for the cobalt that goes into the lithium batteries, the mining of that cobalt is deeply, deeply problematic. And so, as a global community, we really have to map out a much better way to get the minerals and resources that are necessary for a carbon-free future, but one that is that gives back to those communities producing the minerals the wealth that they have that's part of their country. And so the way that the cobalt in particular is mined right now, most of that revenue does not go back to those local communities. And so that's a real problem that I hope that the growing EV community will be able to address.